develop that strength of perseverance. The second part there is God gives wisdom generously when you ask in faith. So the application of point 1 this morning is this. Be joyful in the test. And then the other part, grow up. So maybe that's a little harsh. Maybe you don't like to hear it. It's one of my favorite things to say when someone is not being very mature on the freeway. Like driving in the left lane at like 40 miles an hour. I don't know. Grow up or move over. I don't know. But be joyful in the test. We ought to look at it, maybe in a positive way. God is walking me through this so that it develops my character to be more like His. And that's where we get this maturing process growing up. So the challenge, one of the questions I can ask you this morning, then what attitude do I have when facing outward trials? If I think about it, if something comes against me, am I pretty quick to just throw my hands up and have a fit, Or am I looking at it and going, Lord, this is hard stuff, but I know you're faithful God. I'm going to trust you. Help me understand how to walk through this. So there's the maturity side of it. Where am I at? That's a question you get to ask. That's not for you to answer about me. I can tell you where I'm at. Still working on it, but keep working on it. All right. Verses 9 and 10, it says this. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation, because like a flower of the grass, he will pass away. It's kind of interesting. He's not changing. It sounds different, but he's actually not changing the thought process at all. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation. And then he says, because like a flower, they pass away. Here, it's interesting as he's talking about the lowly brother. Again, this is the second reference to brother. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation. So if someone who is in a place where they're at the very beginning of life, or I don't have much resource, and I suddenly have been elevated and lifted up, let him boast in his exaltation. But what about the rich? Sometimes the rich are humiliated. They have plenty, they have much, but then sometimes they are placed into a place of submission or a place of just, I have nothing. The interesting thing, I think, is that a person who has an unearned promotion has a test. Have you not seen someone who suddenly comes into wealth and they didn't have it? That's a huge test. What are you going to do with this sudden promotion? Are you going to handle it with maturity? Are you going to handle it well? But then how about the person who has much and is suddenly and quickly humiliated? Also a test. So it doesn't matter where you are in life. We still face tests. Whether you started out in a place of lowly estate and now you've suddenly been lifted up, or if you started out in a place or you've been in a place of success and then now you've been humiliated, they're both tests. And we should understand that life, it's a test. And it reaches both people in both parts of the spectrum. James said that they should boast in the trial. Count it a joy. Verse 11, continue. For the sun rises with its scorching heat, withers the grass, flowers fail, and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. The understanding of the reality of life, trials, tests, and it's temporary stuff. So we have to be careful to be aware that the trial is actually for me, and I need to accept it, receive it, and be actually joyful about it. Again, what attitude do you have when facing outward trials? Count it joy. Maybe even boast in your trial. No, not boasting like, look at how sorry I am. Not like that kind of thing. But just, Lord, I know that this is something you have for me. Okay, Lord, strengthen me in it. Amen? Amen. You might know what you're going through right now. You would know. What kind of a test? What kind of an external thing is happening in your life? A challenge that you're facing. Check your attitude on it. Just check your attitude. All right, verse 12. Verse 12 says this. Blessed is the man who remains, here's that word again, steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. So we're back. We didn't really leave the whole topic. We're still on this trial, the steadfastness. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, because when you stood that test, he'll receive the crown of life. Of course, that God has promised. Remaining steadfast by standing the test is rewarded in a crown of life. You're going to see that James follows logic quite regularly. With this, and then this comes. Or the progression of this and this grows into this. And through this 18 verses, you're going to see that happen multiple times. Point number 2 this morning is celebrate your circumstance. Whatever your circumstance, whether you were lowly and you had a sudden lifting, or maybe you were in a place of confidence and all of a sudden, where'd my confidence go and I'm now brought low, celebrate it. Lord, you're doing something and I receive it. The lowly are exalted, the rich are humiliated. But the crown of life awaits those who are steadfast throughout. So that's the point. The application of it for us this morning is this: stand the test. He said if you stand the test, then you'll have the crown of life. So you have to stand the test. So, just as a practical thing this morning, would you stand, if you can, would you stand to your feet? That took some of us a bit of work, right? Of course, yeah. Man, Pastor, I can't believe this. All right. Stand the test. We say the word, but if you're actually physically doing it or you're trying, it takes effort, it takes work. Sometimes this stuff beats against your life and comes into your life, and you're like, I don't think I can survive this. Stand the test. When it comes up against you, with the Lord's help, it's not just on your own, stand the test. He has a plan for you, and it may be that through the test, you'll be even stronger after. Amen? Amen. You may be seated. Thanks for doing that, by the way. So when outward trials come against us, really it's on us. It's in our control how we respond to it. We can count it joy, we can boast, or we can just have a really bad attitude when those external things come against us. We can complain about it. I can't believe this happened to me. I don't deserve this? All kinds of things. It says to stand the test. It says we ought to really celebrate it. Now, verse 13 starts walking us into the second half of this comparison. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. So now that's different, because we're not talking about the testing, we're not talking about the trials, we're talking about temptation. Different word, and we'll find where it comes from in a second. But let no one say, when you're tempted, it's God's fault, I'm being tempted by God. And here's why. Here's the doctrine. God cannot be tempted with evil. So you can't tempt him. We also know from the story of Christ himself and Satan tempting him, he wouldn't give in. So God cannot be tempted with evil. But also, he himself tempts no one. That's not the source. When you're tempted, that's not the source. He is not the source. Amen? Thank you, Lori. All right. Yeah, God doesn't tempt us. It comes from a different place. But sometimes we attribute it to God and we want to blame him. If temptation doesn't come from God, then where does it come from? Next verses, 14 and 15. But each person is tempted when he's lured and enticed by his own desire. Then, here's that progression. Here's that logic, the path of logic. Desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin. Sin, when it's fully grown, brings forth death. The progression of the thing that starts within us from desire, when we give it, when it conceives and is birthed into sin, that sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. It's interesting, he's using these ideas of development, of growth, of maturity. This is an awful maturity, but it's maturity. A developing, a growing of something. Temptation is internal. When we are lured and enticed by our own desires. It's not from God. So we got to quit blaming him. And then we see verse 15. It's from desire to conception, conception to birth, the birth of sin. Sin, as it matures, leads to death. So I asked this question myself, and I'm going to ask you. Is desire, that desire in you, that desire itself, the temptation, is it alone a sin? Well, even in the description, it's not. It's not, because desire plus action conceives and then gives birth to sin. Sin then, nurtured and fed, matures until it's fully grown, and it results in death. There'll be times that there'll be something that pops into your mind, came out of nowhere, left field. You're like, where did that come from? And then hopefully you're not sitting there going, oh, I have sinned, and you didn't even know where it came from. There are desires in us. If we don't act on it, you can reject it, but you haven't sinned yet until action. Because it said the process was from the desire comes the conception. We all know conception is an action. It's Mother's Day, by the way. I got a laugh out of Paul. Thank you, brother. All right. Right? So we know that you can't just go from one thing to suddenly having a baby. There's some action in between. All right, don't want to get too graphic, but you are adults in here. All right. You all were born somehow, right? Okay, but the desire by itself is just there until there's an action, and then that's the conception. The conception creates and births sin. But then sin by itself, even that you could say, oh, forgive me, God. It comes to death when we feed it and we nurture it, and it keeps on going. I don't have to explain to you how that happens, but you do when you return to it and you continue in it. You develop that sin. You help it grow up. But we know that the end of sin is death. Obviously, very different from a test. We just talked about tests and trials, the things that come up to us in our life, and God uses them to mature us. This other thing starts from inside. And we're the ones that develop it and create it, and it ends in death. So I tried to find maybe an example I could describe of this idea of what do you do with it? Internal desire. Well, one answer was, well, reject it, which sounds way too simple, but it actually is the answer. How do you deal with it? Well, reject it. So I was thinking of an example. So just give an example of this. Ice cream. You're like, oh, I like ice cream. Yeah, so do I. So ice cream. I desire ice cream. It's a temptation. I want ice cream. But if I sit here and I thought, man, I'd like some ice cream, nothing has happened to me yet. Until action. I go to Baskin-Robbins. Jennifer and I go, and we get her a scoop of German chocolate cake ice cream, and I get, something like mint chocolate chip. Now I've taken action on it. The desire I had by itself was there, but now I've taken action. Now I'm eating the ice cream, and now the ice cream's affecting me. It's making my cholesterol go up. I'm taking on all these calories. I'm gaining weight. I now snore more because of the ice cream, which is actually what she's told me. But anyway, so you can see how it develops. It doesn't just happen there, because now I want more ice cream. And I want more ice cream. I don't just want one scoop. I want 2 scoops. And by the way, I want that waffle cone with the chocolate on the outside and the little sprinkles. I've just matured the desire from nothing to taking action, and now I'm swinging by Baskin-Robbins by myself because I could really use some ice cream. You see what I'm saying? All right. We take a desire, or we take a temptation. We do. God doesn't do that. We do. And we develop it, and we take action on it. And that's where the beginning of sin, and then we mature it into something that literally ends in death. Hopefully not ice cream, because I still like ice cream. So this morning, what desire, or what internal desire, temptation, am I giving action to? Even at just the beginning. Because there's the beginning of the sin. And then what sin am I nurturing and maturing in my life? Because my warning to all of us is, it leads to death. We know it does. Amen? We don't all like to say amen to those ones. But it's still true. You might say, well, you mean so God doesn't hate me when I'm going through trials and tests? No, actually, he might be using the trial and the test to develop you. But I tell you what, he hates the sin because it's not his fault. We're the ones doing it, and we are responsible for that. And we could also just end it. Verses 16 to 18. Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Third time he says the word brothers. Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Every good gift, every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Of his own will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. He wraps this up by saying, brothers, don't be misled, don't be deceived. God gives good, perfect gifts. His nature, it doesn't change. And it was his word, by his own will, that he brought us forth, that he created us. In fact, he didn't just create us to be one of the creation, he created us to be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Yes, worship. You can bring up the next slide. God allows outward trials to test our faith, to mature us. But we act on the internal desire and temptations, and it kills us. You see the difference now? Because sometimes we'll take temptations and we'll say, I can't believe God is testing me with this thing. I don't know if God invented ice cream. Maybe he did. But what I do with it is on me, all right? There are things in our life that we have to make sure we don't mix up. God does walk us through trials and tests to allow us to develop. The temptations and the sin, that's our own. That's on us. That's on our failure. We have to own that, and we have to deal with that. So what attitude do I have when I'm facing either the outward trial and the outward test? Maybe I get mad at God about that. Remember, we're supposed to count it all joy, brothers and sisters. So that part, how am I considering this issue of inner temptations and sin? Am I blaming God? Am I angry at him? We ought to be careful because in both situations, either it's our fault, the sin and the temptation, or it's God allowing a thing so that we can be developed. The third point this morning is this. It's the life cycle of temptation. Acting on selfish desires gives birth to sin, and then sin, it matures into death. We can't miss that because we all know it starts out usually fairly small. People don't start out imagining they're going to be a lifelong gambler and ruin their whole family or become addicted to this or that and have all these problems. They don't start out that way. It always starts smaller with a desire that then has an action that they gave to it, and then it keeps on maturing as long as we keep feeding it. God made us for better. All good things come from him. He made us for actually better. In fact, he made us to be his premier creation. The application this morning. Don't blame God for temptation. And don't be deceived. The temptation that's out there is stuff we have to deal with. Certainly, we all do. But we don't have to give into it with an action and with the continual feeding so that it develops. Our final slide are the last applications, the applications from before this morning. Be joyful in the test. Because when God gives us tests, it's for a purpose. You need to be developed. We all need to grow up. Amen? Amen. Some of us are like, I'm already there. Well, spiritually, we all need to continue growing. And we need to stand those tests. Because God uses them to develop our character and for us to be more like him. But then also when it comes to the sin, the desire, those temptations, don't blame God. He won't tempt you. He's not tempting you. Your own sinful desire within you is where that comes from. Don't be deceived. I'd like to ask you to stand this morning as we close. Our attitude should be counting it joy. We should be boasting that God has put us through something or allowed us to go through something because we know it's for our better. Not the temptations, but the trials and the tests. Those things are for us to be developed. You can still learn from sin. We've learned from sin in our lives. I'm sure you have. What not to do. But God's plan was to never even have to go there. He didn't want us to go there. He has a better way. He helps us walk through tough things. This morning, I want to encourage us. This morning, if you have been struggling with either a test, a trial, something's going on in your life from the outside, and you're like, I'm still struggling to even have joy in the middle of it, we want to pray with you. We would love to pray with you up here. You can, if you want to pray on this side, we try to make it so we know how to respond to you. If you just want to come and pray to the Lord by yourself, this area is open for you. We won't bother you. But if you want to pray and have someone come and join you, our pastoral staff, our leadership, we'll join you on this side. Just come this way, and we'd love to pray with you. Because you might be struggling with the test or the trial you've been going through to have a good attitude about it. Or maybe you're just still figuring it out. Man, I didn't know I was supposed to thank God for that kind of thing. Or maybe there's a temptation that you've given into, a desire, and now you've been feeding it and it's growing. You don't know what to do with that thing. We'd like to pray with you about that too. We're all there. No shame. We're like, God, we need your help here. So we want to pray with you. And if you want that, over on this side. When they start playing this song, I just want to encourage you, step out from where you are, come forward. We'd like to pray with you and see God do a work in your life this morning.